Hey there, Rapunzel here. My guests for this episode are Adam and Michael Scharff, the Scharff brothers. We talk about artist development, career mentoring, social media, and the single most important factor in any artist making it. Let's do it. This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Rapunzel. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. I want to say thanks to everyone who supports this podcast. The whole thing is intended to help independent musicians. Help them through a curation of expertise of other musicians and industry professionals. If you're loving the podcast, if you support the cause, visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And by the way, if you're a listener of the podcast, I consider you a supporter, especially if you share it with a friend. Again, that's unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn how you can get involved as a supporter. Have you heard of Bandzoogle? They power websites for musicians around the world, including Grammy winners. Their easy-to-use system will get you online fast. They have tons of mobile-friendly templates to help you customize your design and site content. It's built for musicians by musicians. Bandzoogle makes it easy to sell merch, grow your email list, integrate your socials, and they offer support from a musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans are affordable. Go to bandzoogle.com to start your 30-day free trial. Use the promo code Robonzo to get 15% off your first year. Again, that's bandzoogle.com, promo code Robonzo, R-O-B-O-N-Z-O. Adam and Michael Scharff, they are brothers. They're funny and, of course, really nice. I only have nice people on the podcast, right? At least that's how you all present. Speaking of which, we talk about the importance of being really nice to everyone all the time. What's most noticeable about the Scharff brothers is that they're so passionate about mentoring musicians and music development, the industry, timing, the long game. I recently discovered their podcast. It's called Mentoring for the Modern Musician. I really like it. You should definitely check it out. They have a lot of whimsy, these guys, so if you don't do too much whimsy in a single sitting, maybe their podcast is not for you, but that's okay. Whimsy works for plenty of other people. They truly present great info and great insight into the industry, what it takes to make it, and you know what? Maybe you don't want to be in the industry. Maybe you're fine doing the perpetual indie thing. I applaud you, but I also challenge you to consider this. It still, in principle, applies to your world, it being all the knowledge these guys share with their community and with you on this podcast. At least enjoy this conversation. It was great. We had a little off and on audio glitchiness. Stupid internet. I apologize for that, but I think it still works. Here's me, Adam, and Michael Scharff. So I guess icebreaker question here, not something I usually ask, but how about we go with Adam first? What's something that most people don't know about you?
That's a great question. Most people don't know that I took 4 years of Latin in high school.
Wow.
So I know a lot of history about Rome, and I took a language that didn't help me speak another language. I probably should have just taken French or Spanish or German or something.
Maybe, yeah. Have you been to Rome?
I haven't, no. So I speak French, and I haven't even been to Rome. So
just recently went for the first time this year with my wife. It was pretty cool. Michael, what's something that most people don't know about Adam that he didn't tell me? I'm just kidding.
That's awesome. I would rather answer that question. That's it.
Well, you're free to answer either, but the real question is, what's something most people don't know about you?
That's a really great. My first instrument was violin.
Okay, that's cool.
Good point.
You must be accomplished then. You must be. That's a hard instrument. So, guys, tell me about the beginning of mentoring for the modern musician.
Yeah. So it happened really organically. Adam and I have been both teaching for quite a while. Adam's been teaching guitar for, got 30 years, something close to. And we were artists, just like the famous, story. We were almost famous. We were almost famous a number of different times.
Made enough money to continue touring and have families. Almost.
But our practices started to meld, and we have a studio up where we are about an hour north of Boston, and we were recording other artists, and we noticed that the recording process almost never started or ended with the actual recording.
always about artist development, that every artist that we ended up working with, we ended up doing the same sort of artist development, saying the same thing over and over again, almost like, should we just publish an ebook with all the things that we're going to say to everybody? And we noticed that there were some resources for people to get a little bit of industry insight and artist help, but some of it was really, really expensive. And we kept going, man, we really should, somebody should. All of the young artists and the aspiring artists and the established artists who have missed the lecture about the things in the industry that are changing because they change so fast.
Yeah, so we noticed that very often what would end up happening is that once we were done recording a project with a band or an artist, that they would come back for more industry information, more growth as an artist. And we started realizing that what we were actually doing was artist development. And the final straw where we were saying, somebody needs to put this out there and do something about it. And the final straw was I saw this, advertisement online for somebody saying that you can make a lot of money being a musician without ever touring.
And they were charging, I don't know, $5,000 for the course or whatever. And we were like, all right, so first of all, no, you can't make a lot of money as a musician if you're not going to tour. And second of all, the musicians that need this information don't have the $5,000 to give this well-meaning human. While they had a valid point about what they were saying and were teaching some really good skills, we were thinking about ourselves at that point in our career and what would have helped us and what kind of resources we had. And it didn't include dropping $5,000 on a course.
So that's really when the M3 project started. And the podcast was really became the biggest part of it because it was a platform that anybody could access at any time and that we could do without, a lot of expenditures on our own. And we could talk about all of the topics that we feel like most people either don't know or get misinformation about.
Yeah. It's funny how I laid these questions out. It's usually kind of random, and then I kind of try and reorganize them. But you mentioned the podcast, and just this afternoon, and you've mentioned artist development. Just this afternoon, I was listening to episode 102, where you talk quite a bit about artist development, and I was wondering, is there anything that, and I encourage people to go check that episode out. m3artist.com is where you'll find the podcast, or m3artist.com/podcast. And that first letter was M like music or musician. I was listening to that episode a little while ago, and it's good. If there was anything that might be, any one thing that might be mentioned in a bonus episode, which perhaps you've never done, a bonus episode, complement to episode 102, having to do with artist development, maybe something that you wish you'd have had time to squeeze in. Is there any one thing? Or maybe it's just a point that you really want to drive home that you did mention.
Yeah, so I would say, the bonus to that episode will be episodes 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108. It's never ending. All of it is artist development. It is really, honestly, the approach to every one of these podcasts is about artist development, because artist development isn't just, get your sound. It isn't just make sure you're playing out. It isn't just worry about your image. It isn't just, have an image. It isn't just, it's not one thing. It's the whole package. It is your entire career. And I think that if I remember this correctly in the episode, one of the things that we did touch on is that the artists that stay are, for the most part, are the artists that never really stop that process.
They're always looking to grow in some way, that are always looking to figure out a cleaner version of themselves or a new version of themselves. And how are we with language on this podcast?
You can say whatever the fuck you want.
Okay, thank you. So that's good to fucking know. It's really important to not be a dick.
Sure.
In the modern industry, it's more important than ever, not just for, it's always been important if you're going to try to be a side guy to not be a dick, but it's important just in general now, as an artist, as a musician, to not be a dick and understand that you are really important and that you're an artist and that you have something to offer, but you are not the center of the universe.
And you guys have been on this planet a little while. You may not be as old as me. You're probably not. You both look pretty good. But, you know, everyone's voice and frustration is so amplified now. So it's even more because of, you know, the internet and social. It's even more important. I mean, it's always been important, right? But it's even more important for us to be nice guys or nice women all the time and, you know, genuinely, or at least try really hard, genuinely.
Yeah. And look, you know, sometimes for some certain people, part of their personality is that they are kind of a dick, right? But I like what you just said, because what you can do is you can know that about yourself and make an effort in your interactions with, whether it's your interactions with your fan base or your interactions with other musicians or your interactions with music industry people. Know that you tend to err on the side of being a dick and do something about it.
Do you guys coach on that with some people that, okay, your personality's a little edgy and try and give them some learned behavior tips?
So we've had artists that are not necessarily out, because when we're working with an artist, I don't know if you've noticed this when you're working with artists, but one-on-one, people tend to be pretty easy to deal with, because they're looking to you to help them figure out what's going on with their career. So it's not like people are going to be dicks to us, but if we notice a dickishness in their vibe, we tend to try to joke them out of it and explain to them, like, you know, that's cool. Nobody fucking cares about your little story there. They don't even know who you are. Why don't you just play your song and impress them first so that they have something? So there's a way to joke them out of understanding, because it's normally just low self-esteem or a misunderstanding of dynamic in the world or whatever is going on. So it is, I hate the term life coaching, because I've known some life coaches that are just the kind of people that I would avoid at a party, where you go, oh God, Jeff or Tony or Betty or whoever.
One of the really important things for our approach is that we really do frame almost everything we do through a positive narrative. So we try very hard to avoid don't, you shouldn't, this won't happen, right? We try really hard to talk about the do's and model how it is that you want to, you know, we all have frustrations and we all have objections and we all have, you know, can have a negative reaction to something. But if you can reframe it in a way where it talks about the issue or the situation in a positive manner, whether that is even just, this is what I would really like to have happen, right? That when you are dealing with those kind of, you know, that kind of person who maybe never had anybody in their life who has said, hey, you can't just talk to people like that, right? That at least I've found that it is more important than to model what it's supposed to look like, rather than, you know, talk about how don't act like this, right?
Yeah, I think I framed similar advice when I was writing my book, and
I would completely agree. I've read some of that.
Yeah,
that's exactly how you do it.
Yeah, that sometimes you just if you have to fake it, then do so. You know, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and as you said before, with all of the noise that we have additionally now in our lives, not just in the industry, but yes, especially in the industry with socials and, you know, everybody can talk to everybody all the time. You know, we've got a good friend of ours, AJ Toby, who we've interviewed a couple of times on this show, who's owns a publishing company in New York. He runs it. He's a partner. And he talked really early on a couple of years ago about, you know, most of the people who are naturally dicks in the industry are gone because there's less money in the industry now. So it is even more important now than it was for business reasons as well to be a good hang.
For real, all of the publishers and people who do song placements and licensing that we've talked to either in person or on the show, we always ask them, we're like, all right, so would you deal with an artist if they were going to make you a lot of money but they were a jerk? And every single one of them was like, no way. I don't care how much money they'll make me. If they're a jerk and they're hard to deal with, I'm not going to deal with them.
You know, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the whole reputation thing, which obviously being a dick will hang with you on your reputation. But there's a festival that's held here where I live It's called the Boquete Jazz and Blues Festival, and I had the privilege of interviewing the president of the foundation for it a while back in the earlier days of the podcast. But we were talking about how they go about selecting artists, and so they have a gal that does it, who's also one of the performers there. But they basically, their primary criteria is, because they're flying people in and they're paying them, but their main criteria is people that are not difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah, that's it. That's it exactly. And I love that. Thank you for that story too, because that just confirms what it is that we've been hearing from everybody. It's exactly the same thing. And it was like Adam said, and you said earlier, it has always been the case that that's been true for many parts in the industry, but it is now even more pervasive that's just so important.
Really important to debunk the myth of the drunken rock star that trashes hotel rooms and that's what the labels are looking for, or that's what fans want. It's not. That's not the world we live in anymore.
Right. Let me switch gears on you. What do you guys, when we talk about the economy of the new music industry, what typifies it more than anything else for you two?
Live perform. I mean, so if you're talking about where the money is now, obviously what has disappeared is record sales. No one's buying records anymore, and they're really not even buying downloads, and they're not even downloading anymore. The numbers are, the more you look at it, the more scary it is how much they're down. And so what has become more important than ever is the live performance. That really is where you're going to be able to make money.
Live performance and engaged fan base, because an engaged fan base is something that you can cultivate and really have it that will help a sustainable career. Whereas in the past you think, just, get signed by a label and put out a record and my fans will just show up at the gigs and they're nameless, faceless people. It's really important now to understand that if you want a sustainable career as an artist, really an artist of any kind, having a real fan base that you can interact with is crucial.
Well, I'm really happy to hear you guys talk about the importance of live performance. I've gone through fairly recent times thinking, wow, it's a dying art performing live. But what does, for the type of artists that you guys work with or like to, I don't know if cultivate's the right word, but you probably know what I mean. What does an engaged fan base look like?
Well, that's a great question. And I would start first of all by saying that they come in all shapes and sizes.
First, the artist, the band, whatever it is, has to be amazing, has to have something valuable and valid that is going to bring something to the lives of people who are the potential fan base that is unique and artistically and emotionally and spiritually, whatever, valid first. So that has to start, because I think it's easy. Lots of people will talk about marketing and Facebook ads and making sure that you get enough blanket marketing to the right people in the right places. And you go, well, sure. Okay. But first, are you awesome? Because if you're not awesome, this is not going to help you.
Unless you're great, unless you have something really powerful and really talented that touches people, it's not going to matter how much money you put into Facebook marketing.
Tons and tons and tons of amazing, talented, unique, special humans, artists, musicians. And so there's no shortage of that. So once you have that, then
the fan base can be as small as, a couple of hundred people in your region, right? Or as large as a couple 100,000 people around the world. And what's going to be really important is to know that there are really, within that fan base of yours, you've got a couple of 2 or 3 different kinds of fans. You've got the casual fan that's going to go to your show if it's convenient, and they'll probably listen to your stuff on Spotify or Deezer or whatever the platform is that you're streaming in that area of the world. And then you've got the next level up fan they're going to check it out and see when you're going to be in the area and
really, really try to make it to the show.
And, they might get a t-shirt when they come, right? And they'll maybe tell their friends about you. And then you've got the super fan. And the super fan is going to consume everything that you have. The super fan is going to support you on Patreon, right?
But not only are they going to put you on the calendar to come out to your show, they're going to put it on the calendar. They're going to tell everybody at work about it. They're going to make a big day of it. They might take the day off. They're going to show up early and they're going to stay late. And they're the ones that you'll recognize at the show over and over again. And it's important to know, at least to know their face and make some time for them and treat them like a real human, not like a fan. I'm doing air quotes. You can't see it, but a fan. The fans are actual human beings with lives and wants and desires and needs and stories and names. And that they're the ones that, because they're the ones you can count on to help you have a career, it's important to treat them like a human and not like a number.
Sure.
When you are not in their area. So this is where it is, again, incredibly important to have, you want to have their information as well. You want their email address because you want to make sure that you're communicating with them, that you're staying in their life, that you are giving them an opportunity to support you, both just emotionally by still loving your stuff and financially, because those are the fans that they're going to want to buy anything that you do because they're going to want you to be successful.
Right. Makes sense. I like that. So I'm going to switch it again, switch gears again. Production services looks like something that you guys love, or production work looks like something you guys love to do. Is it still a big part of the overarching business for you?
No, it's not. I would love to lie about it and say it is, but I have like honesty Tourette's. So I'm just going to always tell you what it is. And it is not something that we get a lot of work doing. And lots of our friends that have done similar things to what we're doing in our sort of budget, where it's not major label, and it's not necessarily the huge indie, but like the pretty decent indie size projects, those are just not around as much. And I don't know if it's because people are doing it more on their own, or maybe because people aren't making money on records, that they're second guessing whether or not they want to spend money making records, which I totally understand. But it's, for our end, it's not been a huge part of the business of late, of the last year or two.
I think what I've observed with the indie artists are a couple things. A lot of them just struggle to budget in their creative and writing time, and then working toward all the things that they have to do if they're going to try and self-produce. And then those that do, I think, everything's becoming more accessible, so they're very emboldened to self-produce. Maybe they're doing a good job, or maybe they're doing a decent job, and they really should have some help. So that's probably part of it. And plus, more, even the ones that I've seen do full-length releases, and I'm talking, at least 10 songs, or maybe even as few as 8, that kind of looks like what we used to call an album. They're starting to play around with what everyone else has been doing, which is an EP or singles. So that probably has a lot to do with it. I don't know if that's any insight for you guys or anything you didn't know.
I think you're right. And it's interesting. I remember starting to hear bands talk about doing EPs, that was the way to go, probably 15 years ago, that I started hearing rumblings of that and going, oh, that's an interesting thing. And then I was at a show maybe 7 years ago, backstage with a band that's a pretty decent sized band. They're playing 2,000 seat venues around the country. And the guy from the label was talking to him, his A&R guy. And the lead singer from the band was like, so, we were thinking maybe we're going to do an EP. What do you think of that? And the label guy was like, that's a horrible idea. You're an album act. And more and more bands are, probably just because of the nature of the way streaming works now, if you're an indie band and nobody knows you, what's the point of putting 10 songs out that nobody's going to listen to? Why don't you try to put 1 or 2 songs out that are amazing and let them get some traction, spend the money on those rather than spending the money on 10 songs that you're throwing at the wall.
I do want to interject it there real quickly, because I think that there's something else going on that very few people are talking about. And that's that recording for most of our lives, for most of the industry's life, has been based around the album cycle and album sales. And now that there is no album sale for almost everybody, Taylor Swift sold some albums when she put her new one out, which is a really nice album, by the way. But now that people are not selling albums anymore, there's no need to wait 18 months to put out 10 songs, 14 songs, right? You put out 1 or 2 songs when you're done with those 1 or 2 songs. And I actually think it's a good thing, because I think that with streaming and with fan interaction and with things like, platforms like Patreon, where you're paid for every thing that you create, right? That it behooves you as an artist to do it the other way. Put out 1, 2, maybe 4 songs at a time, so that you don't lose track with your fan base, so that they are constantly, we live in this world now where we want it when we want it. And that's no different in the music industry. The fan base is used to, and we've been conditioned to pull up your Amazon app and order it and it'll be here in 2 days, right? And I think that music is also affected by that sort of thinking.
Yeah, it seems like it's become what I put in the bucket of content creation in terms of like doing things like creating blog posts and posting to a YouTube channel and releasing podcast episodes. It's almost like releasing music is the exact same cycle, which makes me want to ask you, do you think there's any value in the artist or band that just like, I have 12 songs, I got to record them, for them to stagger those songs out instead of just releasing them all at once?
It depends on the songs. It depends on the band.
That's a really difficult question to answer with any kind of real authority. That it really is a case-by-case basis in that, I think.
Do you guys in any way feel like you're known for working with artists within a specific genre? Or maybe put another way, would you like to be known as working with artists in another new genre?
I love working with artists that are passionate and talented and hardworking. Selfishly, because those are the kinds of artists that I see make the most progress and that are emotionally willing to put in the time and the energy and the emotional drain that a career is going to give you. And we've worked with artists from all kinds of different genres that fit that bill. So rock bands and singer-songwriters and punk bands and country artists and R&B artists and hip hop and trap artists and a couple of Latin artists that we work with all fit that bill, where they're passionate and talented and hardworking. And then I love being around those types of people because there's an amazing energy that happens. And we get to draw all from their energy, kind of like those evil characters in movies where you're drawing from the youth power, and that's how you keep yourself happy and energized too.
Yeah, I get some of that dealing with my podcast guests.
There you go.
So you guys are known also, or well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as a career counseling, I'll just use those words. I kind of asked this similar question the same way, but what does that look like? And I'm thinking for someone who is maybe hearing your voices for the first time and is thinking about checking out your podcast, or they're going to go to your website and they just want to hear it right here. What does career counseling look like for an artist?
Career counseling is one of those things that is sculpted for individual artists depending on where they're at and depending on what their goals are. So like Adam said earlier, you got to start with the talent, right? There has to be the talent there. If there's not enough talent, it doesn't matter how hard you work or what tricks you try to use. It's going to be an uphill battle that probably won't end in a lot of success. But when you're talking about career counseling, that can be and the reason I'm not trying to be cagey about it, but it will be different depending on the artist and where they're at. So you've got really basically 3 categories of artists. You've got an aspiring artist. So that's somebody who hasn't quite done very much yet. You've got an emerging artist, one that is starting to make a little traction. They've got a sound. They know who they are. They've played a number of shows. They've maybe done a few little tours. And then you've got the established artist. And the established artist is somebody who's been around. They've got a fan base. They've recorded music that they're, that's being consumed on a streaming platform. And each one of those artists will have different needs during their career. And we feel really fortunate. We made it all the way through all 3 stages and maintained a lot of really great relationships with people in the industry. So we are we're constantly updating our knowledge base. So it isn't just enough to learn something about the industry. As you know from doing this podcast and from your own playing, things change so fast in the industry that it isn't just enough to learn something. You have to be willing to unlearn something.
Oh, that's good.
Then relearn how to do it again, right? So there's always a new recording DAW, right? There's always a new way. There's always a new social platform that you want to be engaged in. There's always a new tour package. I mean, they're talking about, in the touring world and the booking world, they're now doing these things where they're not even booking individual acts all the time. They're doing these packages where you're a part of a package that people get, right? So the industry is always changing and innovating and looking for ways to make money, right? Because it's an industry, it's a business. And so one of the things that we need to do is assess where you're at in your career and then help you figure out how to make those positive steps forward in this industry that's always changing.
For artists that have been coached or mentored or brought up in a world where, the industry's not really going to help me, I can make a go of this alone in part and with the team, and there are certain things I can do to create a sustainable career. But maybe they're getting a lot of feedback from people that, man, I think you're destined for bigger things. What might they want to consider to go to the dark side?
I think most of the artists that I have seen or see in that situation, they want to chase the major label or mainstream success for whatever reason. There's all kinds of great reasons to chase that are valid. I would usually, if an artist said that to me, what you just said, like I've been hearing, people think, I should be, I'm destined for great things, and I should go mainstream and major label. I would go, all right, cool. How many people said that to you? And if it's less than 30, I would say, yeah, you know what? Why don't you keep doing what you're doing, sustain your career, and if you're destined for great things, there's going to be no way for it to not happen. But chasing something that you don't understand for reasons that are unclear is a really, really wrong-headed way to guide your career.
One of the hardest things for anybody, but certainly as an artist, and I know it was brutally hard for Adam and I, is to remember that it's about the long game. And the idea that there's a magic bullet or a magic phrase or word or person that is going to instantly propel you to superstardom is a really, really old archetype that, if it ever existed, is really pretty much gone. We can even look at TV shows that can be a really great vehicle to get you a career. For the most part, it's not going to make you a superstar overnight. It's just, that's not how it works. And it's really important to if you are a successful indie artist already, it's really important to really analyze and reflect on how much more a major label can do for you. Because you got to remember that if you're really successful, let's just make up a scenario like, say, Ani DeFranco from the 90s, who was making $4 million a year and selling a lot of records. She was making over $1 million a year. And she was getting courted by every major label, period. All of them wanted her. And the most that they were willing to give her was $1 a record. And she said, look, I'm already selling 500,000 records at $4 a record. You'd have to guarantee me that you can make me sell 15 times the amount of records that I'm selling for me to break even. Where's the advantage in that? And now that there aren't even record sales anymore, streaming pays, and it's a really important part of your career. But it's not like record sales, and it isn't like radio play. And there's less money in licensing now for recorded music. And what most people forget about is that now if you're with a major label, they get a part of your touring money too.
merch. They get a part of your touring. They get a part of your streaming. The 360 deal is a reality that everybody has to deal with now. And if people don't know what a 360 deal is, just Google 360 deal. And there's a lot of information. Basically, they just take a piece of everything that you're doing. So the 360 degrees, everything all around your career, the label gets a chunk of everything in a major label situation. So the money that you would have to make would have to be so unbelievably bigger.
So there are artists for which that is a good thing. But let's take a look at even how Taylor Swift feels about losing her masters to Big Machine, right? You sign with a label and they own you, literally. That's just how it is. It's always been that way. And you want to be careful about what you think you want. It's like Adam said, it's more important to just keep doing the next right thing.
The reality is most people who are gigantic major label artist material don't have time to notice that they're gigantic major label artist material. Their life is so busy that they just are perpetuating, and it sort of happens as a natural part of the course rather than something that someone decides at dinner.
That's a refreshing thing to hear, but the great reminder that you said is that, I guess it's one thing that has never changed about the industry. It is a long game.
Yes. Long game.
Yes.
Well, let me touch on a couple of other services with the time we have left that you guys offer in the mentoring for the modern musician world. Social media consulting, is that still, I assume it is, yes, but is that still a big part of what some clients need, or is social media still a big part of what a lot of artists need to focus on? And I guess if you had some worldly advice to let go of today and to unleash on the listening public in that area, what would it be?
If you are able to be objective at all with yourself, go sit at a table somewhere and open up a computer and get your phone and go to each of your social platforms and think, if I was somebody who didn't know me, would I give a shit about what I'm seeing? And if the answer is, I don't, then fix it. Whatever that means. So, because it's different for everybody. Like, we always ask artists right from the get-go, okay, so we like you. We think you're a good person. We're glad to do this. But we want to start with saying, why do I care? Why do I care about your band, your songs, what is it about you that's special, that's unique, that's going to draw me in? So besides your mom, who thinks you're awesome?
What in their answer to that question, or what does the answer tell you about the artist when you ask that question?
Almost always it's just silence.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm in a room and I'm getting this question from these guys. I'm going to be like, I guess I don't know my story.
Adam will say, well, the why do I care version. And then usually what I'll do is I'll reframe it and I'll go, so if you're thinking of yourself playing in a room and you're, at a club or you're in a, what is it about you that's going to want to make you stay if you were to walk in and see you playing? What is it about your social media presence that's going to make you come back to your page? That's going to make you double tap, right? And say, I love this. This is cool. I like this. I'm going to follow that person. Those are the same questions. And the reason that Adam puts it as why do I care is because that really is the separator for this, separating yourself from the noise. It is the what's special about you. And really, we can do some talking about what we see that's special about people, and each of us do that. Everybody can do that. But it's really valuable to be able to look at yourself and know what's special about you.
Yeah, and I guess that is something we can ask ourselves in all walks of life, whether we're a musician or a blogger or whatever the heck we are. What is so special about me? Why should people care? We may have already covered this, but I had it here on the list, and I'm looking back at my notes, and I don't think anything else that I thought was spontaneous is worthy now, but Well, I do have one, but I think maybe this might be more important. But we may have covered it, and if we did, it's okay. We maybe have a few minutes, and I can hit this other one. But what can you say about your approach to artist mentoring? And again, if you feel like we've kind of covered it, that's cool. But if there's something new,
Well, I will talk about artist mentoring all day long, every day. So I just think that the only thing that we didn't really cover was that. So we do this professionally. I mean, that is part of what we do, for our career. But a mentor can be really anybody who is, a couple of steps ahead of you, who you admire what they're doing.
Jump in real quickly and throw in one little caveat. If you're like, there's an artist who's further ahead than you are, and you want to sort of grab onto them as a mentor, that's awesome. Just make sure that they're successful and not just cool.
And you really do also want to make sure that it's somebody who's positive, who is still doing it in a celebratory manner, not somebody who's negative, not somebody who's going to tell you about how much better it used to be, or about how much easier it used to be, or how much it's not. What you want to look for, those people that make you feel positive about what you're doing, that really inspire you. Like you were just talking about, that you get inspired by your guests, and we feel the same way about the people that we talk to on the daily. And so a mentor can really be that. A mentor can be, somebody who has a podcast who you never interact with, that you're listening to. I'm sure that the people who are listening to you, man, are considering you a mentor. And it's really important to look for those people that inspire you. Look for somebody who inspires you in a positive way.
yeah, that's great. That applies even just to being a musician, right? And surrounding yourselves with as many of those people as you can. And even if it's just one guy or one woman in the band with you that somehow lifts you up through inspiration. And on the mentoring thing, on a mentor, they absolutely should be that. They should inspire you, and obviously you should like them too. So I think that's great. Well, I assume we have a couple minutes here. So I wanted to go back up to something. I don't even remember if this is the part that was meant to be on air, but we were talking about the fact that you're both teachers, music teachers, among other things. Do you guys do mostly one-on-one? Do you teach online? Is it a mix? What does it look like?
It's all one-on-one in our studios, and it can be everything from a guitar lesson to mentoring for someone who's like, I've actually had a few people who are aspiring producers, where we just work on how to work in a DAW and how to run a compressor and how to get a good mix and how to listen. But it's all one-on-one interaction.
I do have a few group lessons that I do vocally. It's always helpful for a vocal student to sing in front of other people, to get rid of those nerves and get that out there. I like what Adam just said about that he does do sessions for people to learn how to record better, and it just makes me want to piggyback on something we did mention earlier on air. People recording themselves, and that may be why that part of our business has slowed down. It used to be like 30% of what we do, and now it's considerably less, because it's everybody can. If you got a laptop, you got a Mac, you got GarageBand, right? But it is still, I would still encourage people to find somebody to go and learn how to use some of that equipment to the best of its ability, so that these recordings that you're doing on your own are still going to sound better. And then you did also ask if we do teach online, and yeah, Adam and I both do Skype sessions with students who are in different parts of the country, and I've got a couple of students who are off to college now and still want to check in and get a lesson in here and there, and we'll do it that way too.
That's cool. I would imagine I have a lot of teacher friends, and I'm sure that many of the people I speak to on the podcast, unbeknownst to me, are teachers. Some of them will just mention that they are, but I would imagine there's a huge relationship component in there, like the one you just mentioned about people going off to school or whatever. They're probably just as much wanting to hang with you online because of the relationship you built. Is that an accurate thing to share with people that either are teaching or have been teetering on whether they should?
Absolutely. And again, when I first started teaching, the idea of student-centered, individualized instruction was sort of poo-pooed by lots of people. They thought it was weird and wanted to teach everybody to read, Mary Had a Little Lamb single notes on a guitar. And I don't know anybody who's ever gone, man, I really hope I can play Ode to Joy single note on a guitar. Everybody wants to play, Hendrix or play whatever it is they want to play. And so part of the nature of that was nice for me that I didn't know I was going to get from teaching that way is it forces you to have an individual relationship with each student and have each moment that you're with them be present in the moment. Keep your mind where your body is, which is sort of what I tell my students anyway. But I get to do that then as a teacher and as a sort of a friend and a mentor that way, that I get to keep my mind where my body is and be in the moment with the student. And that sort of is how this evolved into mentoring and doing a podcast and talking about some of the stuff we've been talking about for years, is that we're trying to sort of put in a little capsule the kinds of things that we talk to our students about.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so the Mentoring for the Modern Musician podcast has recently passed 100 episodes. For those of you listening to this one, you should definitely check it out. You can find info about the podcast and everything these guys are doing at m3artist.com, and that's M like musician and the number 3 artist.com. And I know the podcast, I can see right here, is available in all the great places where you can find your favorite podcasts and subscribe to your favorite podcasts. I highly encourage you to check it out. And a quick note, compliments to the two of you. We were having some audio difficulties. Sorry, listener, but you have such a great dynamic together. It was a little lost in our conversation because of the sound thing we were going through. You did a great job anyway, by the way. But for those of you who are thinking about checking out the podcast, you will be amazed at the dynamic these two guys have. And if you thought there was any whimsy in either of them in this conversation, wait till you hear them on their own podcast.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of laughter.
Well, it's great talking to you guys. Thanks for spending time with me this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having us on your podcast, and we're really, really honored to be here.
Absolutely.
Really great to meet you. Love what you're doing. We're big fans.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and the pleasure was all mine. Hey, thanks again for listening. If you are loving the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And again, if you're a listener, I consider you a supporter, especially if you shared it with a friend. Thank you. Have you heard of Bandzoogle? Yep, they're powering websites for musicians all over the world. Their easy system will get you online fast. They have tons of mobile-friendly templates to help you custom design your site and content. It's built for musicians by musicians. They make it easy to sell merch, grow your email list, integrate your socials, and they offer support from a musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans are affordable. Go to bandzoogle.com to start a free trial, and be sure to use the promo code Robonzo to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Robonzo, ROBONZO. Look for show notes and links to most everything mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening. With a whole lot of gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.